Hey there, this is Natalie, and it's traditional to start videos on this topic by ominously saying that my channel and all of the other Anitubers you watch may soon be gone. Or, you know, that the sword of Damocles is hanging over our heads, and it's very kawaii. Ooh. Yes, in this video I'm going to be talking about some pretty grave issues potentially facing Anitubers, due to issues with how Japan views copyright infringement. I'm going to be going into what's happened to a channel called Suede recently in regard to Shueisha, and into the matter of geo-blocking, which will be referring to what's been going on with Totally Not Mark and Toei. The big point of this video, to be upfront, is that we need geo-blocking. That is, the ability to selectively make our YouTube content only available in certain countries or regions. And we need it to be a feature that's either available to everyone, or if that opens up too many problems, then we need it to be something that anyone can apply for to have for their channel. It needs to not just be something people with very big channels and a contact at YouTube, like Totally Not Mark, can get done for them on a case-by-case basis, and still after a lot of stress and hassle. This is because if we can block our anime content in Japan, which is not a market Western Anitubers in languages other than Japanese target anyway, due to there being plenty of content about anime in Japanese that Japanese audiences would rather watch, then all of the issues I'm about to talk about would no longer be posing a threat to, and I'm not being dramatic here, the whole future of talking about anime and other Japanese media on YouTube. It's a bit of a heavy video, and I know it's not the video I said would be coming next on Twitter, but I think this topic is important, and I hope you do too. Plus, I'm in a bad mood because I have to go to the dentist's tomorrow, and I have a really bad phobia of that sort of thing, so I'm going to talk about something bad. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and I promise the rest of my content will be about less miserable things. You know, unless I get banned. If you're not new and haven't subscribed yet, then please consider doing it, because it's nearly my birthday and it'll make me really happy. And yes, I am going to be playing that card in every video and stream this week. Now, copyright strikes on Anitubers are a topic I've covered before, back last summer when I received some strikes from Kadokawa on some ReZero content. You can watch that video for the full background on the Kadokawa v ReZero content creators saga if you want to, but just as some brief background to feed into what I want to talk about today, Kadokawa were periodically dishing out strikes on ReZero videos very liberally throughout 2021, through a company called Crosswarp. And while all of the channels I know of that received strikes from them did manage to counter them and get them removed, it was a big source of stress for a lot of us for basically the entire year. And it did result in some of us changing our approaches in ways that weren't really focused on actually improving what we made for our audiences. Whether by covering ReZero itself less in favour of other series, by only using still images and no clips in ReZero videos, or by deleting a lot of content that by normal standards of fair use, there was nothing wrong with. Some people like Father Bubbus just gave up on doing an anime channel entirely and moved on to other projects, deleting all of their anime content just in case future strikes could threaten any other channels they made. Because when you get a channel terminated due to copyright strikes, you're not allowed to have a YouTube channel at all ever again, and this is something they do police quite seriously. Why Kadokawa were, or potentially still are, going after ReZero in particular, when they own just about every well-known isekai IP and a lot of stuff in other genres too, is still a mystery to this day. But while in the main circles of creators I know who tend to cover similar series, Kadokawa was the one pissing in our cornflakes, as it were. Even just a cursory look into other anime communities will show that Toei and Shueisha have the same level of notoriety among people who normally cover things like long-running shonen. Running into copyright issues when talking about Japanese media is, to be honest, something most Anitubers have just kind of come to expect to happen from time to time. Before I even started a channel, it was something I had a sense was an issue for Anitubers just from the channels I watched. But while that has been the reality for a long time, in most people's experiences, it has been possible to counter the strikes successfully and avoid ending up with channels being terminated. It is scary and stressful and basically makes all the work you put into the videos that got strikes useless, because even when the videos are restored, there won't be any momentum around them and the algorithm will just ignore them. But a lot of us have just become jaded that it's just a weird quirk of the whole Anituber thing. And sadly, we just suck it up that on any given day, you could wake up to a random strike on a seemingly completely arbitrary video that you may have had up for a year already. But it now seems like that could actually be a level of complacency we can't really afford to have. This is where we need to talk about the video by Suede. Now, Suede was a Pokemon related channel. I don't know him personally in any capacity, and I wasn't watching channels in his niche, so it was a video someone sent to me, and which I've linked to in the description. It's well worth watching if you're an Anituber or thinking of starting a channel, or if you watch Anitubers and don't like the idea of that content being under threat. His video is titled "Every Anituber Could Be Gone Tomorrow," and as clickbaity as that sounds, that is actually his genuine concern in making this video. It's worth noting that this is now the only video on his channel. Everything else is gone, and according to a not always especially accurate extension I have called TubeBuddy, he's deleted somewhere in the region of 5 million views worth of videos, with his channel having had 110 videos up before this horrible situation happened to him. He says his channel is beyond saving now and will ultimately be deleted due to the no-win situation Shueisha have created, and that this is something that could very soon happen to all Anitubers, should other companies like Toei and Kadokawa decide to use the approach Shueisha used with him. It's also worth noting that Suede's channel currently has about 22,000 subscribers, and I would say, as someone in the same sort of size range, that that's a pretty bad position to be in. You're established enough that your channel is probably a significant part of your income, so having it taken away suddenly and randomly is a major practical problem, as well as being generally disappointing and demoralizing, as it would be for any channel. But you're not big enough by general YouTube standards to have a contact at YouTube, or for YouTube to really pay attention to you and offer much help in resolving things. Something I'll talk about more when we get onto the geo-blocking solution that was offered to Totally Not Mark. So, as Suede explains in his video, Shueisha took a new approach in striking his content that is virtually impossible to fight for him or any other Anituber outside of Japan. See, what typically happens when you get a strike is you counter it by saying that the video was your own unique commentary, that use of the IP was minimal, informative, promotional, or for parody purposes, and that your video does not form an alternative to the IP holder's product that could lead to a loss of income for them. Basically, that your video is transformative rather than piracy. If YouTube accept that, they then forward it onto the company who gave you the strike. They then give them 14 days to show evidence that they're pursuing a legal case against you. If they don't, then YouTube takes the case as resolved, removes your strike, and allows the video to go back up. Normally, this is really just a case of calling the company's bluff, and they never do respond with evidence of taking legal action, so you just have to wait it out and hope that you don't get up to 3 strikes and risk a YouTube ban while those 14 days are passing. A couple of points about doing this though are that the fact they don't take legal action is not to say it's because they were legally in the wrong to try to take your videos down. In Japan, fair use laws are almost non-existent, and so companies tend to view things we would see as transformative content as basically just the same as piracy. Within their own legal framework, they're not actually doing anything wrong by trying to take us down. It seems kind of obvious that from a business perspective, taking down content that they could just consider free publicity for their series in the West would do them more harm than good. But if they're just using automated tools to find anything with their content in it, and the norm in Japan is for that not to be allowed at all, then they're probably just not putting that much thought into it, and channels like ours are just collateral damage in what they do as businesses to fight the kind of piracy that actually does cause them to lose money. It's also important to remember that fair use, or its equivalents in countries other than the US like fair dealing, are something that can be used as a defense if someone does try to sue you for copyright infringement. They're not a set of rights that we have when creating stuff, or even a part of YouTube policy, where YouTubers promise to let creators use whatever they want as long as it fits within those terms. A lot of people say, well, YouTube is American, and in America, fair use applies, so YouTube should just throw out these strikes every time. But again, fair use is a valid defense in America should things get that far, but it isn't a right we should assume we have because we're on an American platform. Bear all of this stuff about American versus Japanese fair use in mind, as it will become important in just a moment when I get to the totally not Mark situation, and why we need geo-blocking to be available to everyone who needs it immediately. Still, what happened with Suede was that ShowPro didn't behave as expected when he countered. Now, since Suede is concerned that his channel with this one video on it may actually be gone in days, I'm going to show some key parts of it here rather than summarising it, because while you can watch it right now using the link in the description, that may not be possible very soon. So, here's what happened.
About a week ago, I got an email from YouTube Copyright. It seemed to be a pretty standard counter notification notice, however the wording at the bottom was different. We've received the attached court complaint in regard to this content. The content will not be reinstated at this time, but the copyright strikes will be resolved unless a court determines copyright infringement has occurred. If you get a final judgment in your favor, you can submit proof of such on this thread, and the videos may be restored. This is what was attached. A court complaint by ShowPro entirely in Japanese. Since I was lucky enough to have a friend who could read it, I found out that ShowPro was basically serving a small claim, demanding I pay 80,200 yen as well as legal fees for using their IP without permission. On the YouTube side, the phrasing of the email meant that while the videos currently count only as copyright claims, the instant this issue is resolved, they will become strikes. Since there's well over 3 videos that have been claimed, this means bye-bye channel. So of course, all of the videos mentioned in it were taken down and the option to counterclaim had been removed. The only option left was contact claimant. I had no idea how to respond, especially since not only was the notice entirely in Japanese, but after having it legally translated by a third party at my own expense, I found that there was no time frame given and most bizarrely no means by which to actually pay the fee. That wasn't the only weird thing about it. ShowPro didn't demand all of my videos be taken down, just 89 of the over 200 possible videos that could easily meet the same criteria. Then there was that amount. 80,200 yen is almost $700 in the US, or just over 1,000 in New Zealand where I live. It was big enough to hurt a lot, but suspiciously small in comparison to what they could feasibly demand. The way the number was reached was unusual too, as instead of demanding a percentage of the revenue I received, they demanded 0.02 yen per view as damages.
Next, he talks about how it was virtually impossible to find a lawyer that could help him with this. He lives in New Zealand and needed a lawyer who was both an expert in copyright disputes and international law, who could also speak Japanese. And it seems such a person was impossible to find. In the end, he did manage to consult with a Japanese lawyer who spoke English and did have expertise in the relevant legal niches after many referrals. But even just getting that far took some luck and would be unlikely for most people in the West. Once his Japanese lawyer had been able to review the situation, this was what Suede learned.
This was bad enough, but then the lawyer hit me with a bombshell that made everything click into place. He told me that if I refused to pay, it would cost ShowPro much more than 80,200 yen in legal fees to make me pay from New Zealand. Suddenly, it all made sense. The large but not too large fine, the vague and obtuse documentation, the fact that the fine was based on views and not revenue, this was basically an international slap suit. John Oliver did a good video on them, link in the description, but at its most basic, a slap suit or strategic lawsuit against public participation is when a plaintiff makes it needlessly difficult difficult, confusing, or expensive for the defendant to respond, burdening them with the cost of a legal defense until they abandon their criticism or opposition. The lawyer I talked to said I have about 3 months before the judgment on that complaint goes through Japanese court, at which point the takedowns will all become official strikes. The channel will be deleted, and I'll be given the means to either pay the fine, ignore it, or fight it. If I pay, I admit fault, so the strikes stick, the channel is deleted, and the whole thing becomes legal precedent. If I ignore it, they probably won't pursue it, but the channel will still be deleted, and I'll never be able to visit Japan, one of my lifelong dreams, without the risk of being grabbed at the border and fined. If I choose to fight, I would have to spend massive amounts of money hiring an international lawyer in a country where fair use isn't really a thing. I would be 99% likely to lose and bankrupt on top of it. Basically, it was pure intimidation tactics since they don't have any financial reason to pursue the fine, but I have to spend big bucks that I don't have scrambling to translate and detangle the process if I want to even get to the point of challenging them.
So, essentially, Shueisha have him over a barrel. And as he explains at the end, the process they followed to cause this would be a simple one for them to do again, which is probably why they didn't strike all of his videos, but only some. So even if his channel somehow survives this, they can repeat the process at any time. And yeah, where the show pro gambit, as he calls it, is easy for these companies to execute, they'll almost certainly do it to other creators. And it can't be long before other Japanese publishers start using the strategy too. Knowing the issues that people have already had from the likes of Toei and Kadokawa, this does not seem like a stretch at all. If you have content that's available in Japan about a lot of different series on your channel, like me and probably the majority of Anitubers, then you could even have the pleasure of being hit by more than one company with these things. Now, the situation with Totally Not Mark was quite different. As his channel isn't likely to be terminated at this point in time, I'm just going to link to his video in the description rather than playing chunks of it. But essentially, he was being hit with mass strikes from Toei on content about a variety of IPs, which would have resulted in enough strikes to instantly ban his channel. Bear in mind, it only takes 3. Now, because Totally Not Mark is a well-established Anituber who's been around for years and has over 700,000 subscribers, though I'm actually embarrassed to admit I didn't know who he was before this fiasco because I don't really follow the big shonen stuff, he was able to speak to a real person at YouTube rather than using their Twitter bot type thing like us plebs, and he heard some very interesting and fairly disturbing things from his liaison point there. It seems that before he even received the strike notifications, Toei had issued YouTube with takedown requests, not copyright claims, but takedown requests for more or less everything on his channel. YouTube actually responded to them first by asking them to consider fair use and provide further justification for the takedowns before taking any action against Totally Not Mark or making him aware that Toei had made these claims. This would be in line with their policy, though of course we can't possibly know if YouTube do this as a matter of course, or only if the channel is above a certain size and therefore worth more to them to keep active. But Toei, instead of replying to YouTube regarding the fair use issue, instead broke YouTube's policy and just went ahead and manually claimed over 150 of his videos, causing a different process to come into effect and his videos to be instantly taken down, as well as him becoming aware that anything was happening by waking up to over 150 email notifications about copyright takedowns. Now Mark, sorry I'm bored of saying Totally Not Mark, and I reckon he actually is Mark, points out that while Toei actually broke YouTube's rules here, if they hadn't, and had actually provided YouTube with reasoning that his content violated Japanese fair use, which as we've established is almost non-existent, so it probably did, then YouTube would have had to honour it, to avoid setting any risky precedents involving their safe harbour status, and so they'd have had to take down his videos and strike his channel into oblivion. In a sense, Mark was lucky that Toei screwed up and made a dick move like this, and YouTube were on the case for him, because it meant the copyright claims were null and void. But of course, while that meant he could put his videos back up, His contact point at YouTube advised him that if he did, Toei could just do the same thing again, and this time they might follow YouTube's policy properly, provide the justification based on Japanese fair use law, and his content and probably his channel would be gone. So a lot of back and forth between Mark, YouTube and Toei ensued, with Mark never actually speaking directly to anyone from Toei, and the whole thing involving some quite baffling actions on Toei's part, and that's all detailed in his video. But ultimately, YouTube came up with the solution of blocking his content in Japan, while leaving it available in most other territories. This protects him because if his content violates the far less robust Japanese fair use policies, but is not available in Japan, then Toei or other Japanese IP holders would have to press the issue outside of Japanese courts, and so they're far less likely to do so. Now, the situation with Mark also highlighted just how casual Toei were being about the content of his they wanted taken down. Some of the videos didn't even have any footage in them from any of their properties, and when asked to confirm which of the original list of over 150 videos they found unacceptable, they came back with a list of about 86 that Mark found frankly bewildering because of its seemingly arbitrary choices. They would have part 1 of a series of similarly formatted videos, but not part 2, and stuff like that, as well as deeming some videos unacceptable that didn't have anything they could say was their own content in them, while leaving some with a lot of clips off of the list. Those of us making ReZero content found a similar arbitrary approach from Kadokawa, where on channels like mine or somebody like JakeZ123, where we had over 100 videos about ReZero, some with clips, some with none, they just tried to take down one random one at a time. And as a lot of people pointed out, they seem to be going after analysis type channels that just used very short clips behind scripted original content, but not after reaction channels that had full episodes of the show in their content. Not that I'm condemning reaction channels here, it's just something people found strange, given reaction channels that do show the episode are definitely more of a grey area in terms of whether they provide an alternative to the IP holder's product than analysis, essay, comedy or review type content that pretty much nobody who hasn't already watched the IP holder's product would be interested in. These companies' choices look completely bewildering from the outside, and it's very hard to say that even if they are within their rights to strike people based on IP law in Japan, that they're making a good faith effort to prevent piracy and protect their revenue, rather than, well, I don't even know what the goal of taking down random YouTubers in other countries who love their properties would be. They weren't even targeting people who were being heavily critical of their IPs, which would at least make sense, even if it would be very disingenuous, but content by and aimed at fans of the properties in question. So, given we have no chance of understanding what it is they want from us to avoid them striking us, or worse, pulling the show pro gambit, it seems like the only way we can have any kind of security in continuing to just talk about anime, manga, light novels, and other media these companies own is for YouTube to back us up and make geo-blocking an option for all of us, not just the big channels, not just the people who joined multi-channel networks, which is something most creators don't really want to do, but everyone who wants to be able to participate in the whole anime subculture with content on YouTube. All of the big channels were small channels once, and as a community we kind of want new channels coming in and filling niches around particular shows or adding fresh perspectives. And right now, it's not an inviting prospect for a new YouTuber to enter the anime space at all. I've only been around on YouTube for a year and a half, and I feel like I'm just getting started. You know, there's a lot more I want to do, and I'm sure all of the other creators out there with under 100,000 subs who don't have a contact at YouTube yet feel the same. Those under 1,000 subs need this option. It needs to be available to everyone who wants it. And if making it a default option causes too many issues, in terms of it being something that could be exploited for piracy, then let it be something we can apply for. There are already plenty of features YouTube has to check your channel for if you apply for them, like monetization itself, memberships, and so on. So adding geo-blocking as an option any channel can request would solve the issue without creating too much extra work for YouTube. I mean, it's probably a feature only people in a few niches like anime would actually want anyway. But as YouTubers, we do tend to really only understand the environment in our own niches, and the kind of adjacent ones. So who knows? It could be that geo-blocking would also solve problems in other parts of YouTube that I've never even heard of. But if it doesn't, if it only fits this one particular problem in this one sector of pop culture YouTube, then how much work would it really be to let the people who are concerned about their coverage of Japanese media apply to have geo-blocking enabled on their channels? Well, that's really all I have to say about it. I really made this video to raise awareness about the issue, give my opinions on it, and just vent a bit. I don't have a specific call to action to give you if you care about this right now, but I'll be keeping up with developments on this in terms of YouTube, and just really hoping it is something they do take seriously and act on fast. We want the outcome Totally Not Mark got to be the story from all of this that sets the precedent for what happens next for Anitubers, not the story of Suede and the show Pro Gambit. As always, thanks to my supporters on Patreon who are on screen right now, and thank you to everyone who supports my channel by watching my videos and of course subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching this one, and I hope to see you again very soon.